Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. Anthony Joshua's promoter Eddie Hearn has named a three-man list of potential opponents for Anthony Joshua on June 1st in New York. They are searching for a replacement after Jarrell Big Pharmacy Miller failed 3 doping tests and put paid to his chances of facing Joshua on that date. Originally, Luis Ortiz was the top name on Joshua's wish list. Negotiations ensued, but they broke down pretty quickly after Team Ortiz came out publicly saying Eddie Hearn was a liar, a cheat, and had been lowballing them. Subsequently, the advisor to Luis Ortiz has come out against his own promoter, Dade Promotions, saying actually they were saying some things that weren't quite true and it's our fault if the fight falls through. It wasn't a lowball offer. Please bring us back into this. We'll accept the fight. We'll take the $5 million. But seemingly, too little, too late. Eddie Hearn has spoken to media in Los Angeles talking about potential opponents, and Luis Ortiz isn't in the mix given some of his statements. But who knows? It's still a negotiating period, but from the language that he was using, it seems that they've moved past that option and that Ortiz is no longer in the running. He said after June 1st, Anthony Joshua could face him, but it seems from what he's saying, the 3 names still actually in the running, Michael Hunter, Andy Ruiz Jr., and as an outside chance, Trevor Bryan. He noted that Don King, Bryan's promoter, has been calling him repeatedly, just all day, every day, wanting that fight in New York. Trevor Bryan is the WBA interim champion. He's ranked number 1 in the WBA rankings. He's not above the world rankings like Manuel Charr, Anthony Joshua, and Joe Joyce, but Bryan has a wafer-thin resume, and Hearn even noted as such. So really, that kind of feels like that might be just fleshing out the 3-man list as opposed to being a really viable option. Trevor Bryan fought BJ Flores for that interim title. It was put on the line at the last minute, and prior to that fight, he'd fought 2 guys that had over 40 losses combined. So that's not a guy that fight fans would want to see in with Anthony Joshua. And Trevor Bryan on social media has been calling for that fight. But then again, what about 100 heavyweights have been out on their social media platforms campaigning for a fight with Anthony Joshua? And actually, I've got to note, some of the call-outs and some of the statements by some of these boxers on their social media, you've probably seen some of this too. Some of it just sounds so delusional. Some of them think that they are so in the running, and it's like, you're not even in the top 50. How would that ever happen? Just my thoughts on that. But the 2 likely names, and this is sort of firmed up in recent days, Michael Hunter. He was an immediate favourite to potentially face Joshua because he ticks some of the boxes. He's American, it's a fight in New York, and also he's got some momentum in the heavyweight division right now after some of his recent wins. But he is coming up from cruiserweight, and many would consider that potentially to be a bit of a mismatch of sorts. I'm not saying it is a mismatch, but a guy coming up from cruiserweight, there's some perception issues. He's only been at heavyweight for about a year or so. Lost to Alexander Usyk, so it doesn't tick all the boxes. And then you have Andy Ruiz Jr., who's been firming up as another favourite in recent days, given some of his statements, calling for the fight, saying he wants that, and seemingly that's been well received by Eddie Hearn. And he spoke about Hunter and Ruiz being guys that really want the fight, that it's not all about the money, that they want the opportunity, and that they legitimately believe that they can win. But I guess with Ruiz, for casual fans, not really known, but also casual fans will see him and go, this guy's completely out of shape. This is a joke fight. This is some of the perception that casual fans do have. So there are pros and cons with either of those options. But in the situation where we're effectively, 1 month out from fight night, there's going to be no perfect option. It did look like Luis Ortiz would sort of fit the bill and be the guy that most fans wanted. But seemingly, from some of Hearn's statements, he is not in the running now. And that sort of leads me to think, is actually a deal done with one of either Hunter or Ruiz Jr., but it's just yet to be announced, and there is set to be some form of announcement in the coming week. We don't know when, we don't know who it's going to be, but I would say, given some of the rhetoric from Eddie Hearn, talking about Luis Ortiz can sign a fight with Anthony Joshua later, even then, I didn't know if that's really realistic, because he's not going to have any scope after this fight on June 1 to really be taking voluntary shots. Luis Ortiz is not in a mandatory position, and it's probably going to be mandatory, and a possible undisputed fight at some point. And that's looking more and more like 2020, but that's not new news either. It's been fairly feeling like it's been going that way for some considerable time. Deontay Wilder had recently sort of said that Josh will probably get his wish, that Joshua didn't want the fight, and he had originally said 2020, but some of that might be because he's lining up a pipeline of his own fights after Dominic Breazeale for the rest of 2019. And it looks like Luis Ortiz could be one of those opponents, a rematch with Deontay Wilder potentially later in the year, and maybe also an Adam Kovnatski fight for Deontay Wilder. A lot of speculation right now. Ortiz's management in trying to get the Joshua fight back alive. In different interviews, the advisor Jay Jimenez had said they've effectively been guaranteed similar money for a fight later in the year, and that could probably only be a Deontay Wilder rematch. And there's been some other comments floating around in the media from other members of Team Ortiz that suggest it is the Deontay Wilder rematch. But would that pay the same sort of money that Anthony Joshua could pay Luis Ortiz? It's sort of hard to think it would be. It would have to be on pay-per-view, but is Luis Ortiz and Deontay Wilder, is that really going to be a barn burner on pay-per-view? I don't know. I mean, we've just had Fury and Wilder, and I don't know that Deontay Wilder has increased his profile to the point where he's just going to be a bankable pay-per-view star every single time, because let's face it, he was on pay-per-view one time, and now he's back to Dominic Breazeale on regular Showtime. And the whole line about, I'm betting on myself, if he was really betting on himself, he would have done this on pay-per-view and proved that he is this guy that can fight anyone and still get a whole bundle of pay-per-views. But, I guess these things, there's commercial realities to it all, but it would be hard to believe that Luis Ortiz could get the same sort of purse that he could with Anthony Joshua facing Deontay Wilder. There's just not the commercial history there to sort of back that up and suggest that that's credible at this point. I guess stranger things have happened, but we'll have to see. But what do you make of some of these statements from Eddie Hearn talking about the three-man list? Hopefully, in my view, it's not going to be Trevor Bryan, but Andy Ruiz Jr. and Michael Hunter. I've got some reservations with each fight for different reasons, but overall, for a short notice fight, they're probably amongst the best of the bunch that you could sort of hope for. What do you make of it all? Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.